François-René, Vicomte de Chateaubriand was a French writer, politician, diplomat, and historian, who is considered the founder of Romanticism in French literature. Descended from an old aristocratic family from Brittany, Chateaubriand was a royalist by political disposition, in an age when a number of intellectuals turned against the Church. He authored the Génie du Christianisme in defense of the Catholic faith. His works include the autobiography Mémoires d'Outre-Tombe, biography, Early Years in Exile. Born in Saint-Malo, the last of 10 children, Chateaubriand grew up in his family's castle in Combourg, Brittany. His father, René de Chateaubriand, was a former sea captain turned ship-owner and slave trader. His mother's maiden name was Apollon de Bédet. Chateaubriand's father was a morose, uncommunicative man, and the young Chateaubriand grew up in an atmosphere of gloomy solitude, only broken by long walks in the Breton countryside and an intense friendship with his sister Lucille. Chateaubriand was educated in Dole, Rennes and Dinan. For a time he could not make up his mind whether he wanted to be a naval officer or a priest, but at the age of 17, he decided on a military career and gained a commission as a second lieutenant in the French army based at Navarre. Within 2 years, he had been promoted to the rank of captain. He visited Paris in 1788 where he made the acquaintance of Jean-François de la Harpe, André Chénier, Louis Marcelin de Fontaines and other leading writers of the time. When the French Revolution broke out, Chateaubriand was initially sympathetic, but as events in Paris became more violent he decided to journey to North America in 1791. He was given the idea to leave Europe by Chrétien Guillaume de Lamoignon de Malesherbes, who also encouraged him to do some botanical studies. The Journey in America in Voyage en Amérique, published in 1826, Chateaubriand writes that he arrived in Philadelphia on July 10, 1791. He visited New York, Boston and Lexington, before leaving by boat on the Hudson River to reach Albany. He then followed the Mohawk Trail up the Niagara Falls where he broke his arm and spent a month in recovery in the company of a Native American tribe. Chateaubriand then describes Native American tribes' customs, as well as zoological, political and economic consideration. He then lets on that a raid along the Ohio River, the Mississippi, Louisiana and Florida took him back to Philadelphia, where he embarked on the Molly in November to go back to France. This experience provided the setting for his exotic novels Les Natchez, Atala and René. His vivid, captivating descriptions of nature in the sparsely settled American Deep South were written in a style that was very innovative for the time and spearheaded what later became the Romantic movement in France. As early as 1916, scholarship has cast doubt on Chateaubriand's claims that he was granted an interview with George Washington and that he actually lived for a time with the Native Americans he wrote about. Critics have questioned the veracity of entire sections of Chateaubriand's claimed voyages, notably his passage through the Mississippi Valley, Louisiana and Florida. The return to France. Chateaubriand returned to France in 1792 and subsequently joined the army of royalist émigrés in Coblentz under the leadership of Louis-Joseph de Bourbon, Prince de Condé. Under strong pressure from his family, he married a young aristocratic woman, also from Saint-Malo, whom he had never previously met. Céleste de Busson de la Vigne. In later life, Chateaubriand was notoriously unfaithful to her, having a series of love affairs. His military career came to an end when he was wounded at the Siege of Thionville, a major clash between royalist troops and the French Revolutionary Army. Half dead, he was taken to Jersey and exile in England, leaving his wife behind. The exile in London. Chateaubriand spent most of his exile in extreme poverty in London, scraping a living offering French lessons and doing translation work, but a stay in Suffolk was more idyllic. Here Chateaubriand fell in love with a young Englishwoman, Charlotte Ives, but the romance ended when he was forced to reveal he was already married. During his time in Britain, Chateaubriand also became familiar with English literature. This reading, particularly of John Milton's Paradise Lost, had a deep influence on his own literary work. His exile forced Chateaubriand to examine the causes of the French Revolution, which had cost the lives of many of his family and friends. These reflections inspired his first work, Essai sur les Révolutions, an attempt in 18th-century style to explain the French Revolution. It predated his subsequent, Romantic style of writing and was largely ignored. A major turning point in Chateaubriand's life was his conversion back to the Catholic faith of his childhood around 1798. The Château de Combourg, where Chateaubriand spent his childhood, François-René de Chateaubriand by Anne-Louis Girodet de Roussy-Trioson. Consulate in Empire. Chateaubriand took advantage of the amnesty issued to émigrés to return to France in May 1800. Chateaubriand edited the Mercure de France. In 1802, he won fame with Génie du Christianisme, an apology for the Catholic Christian faith which contributed to the post-revolutionary religious revival in France. It also won him the favor of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was eager to win over the Catholic Church at the time. Appointed Secretary of the Legation to the Holy See by Napoleon, he accompanied Cardinal Fesch to Rome. But the two men soon quarreled and Chateaubriand was nominated as Minister to Valais. He resigned his post in disgust after Napoleon ordered the execution in 1804 of Louis XVI's cousin, Louis-Antoine Henri de Bourbon-Condé, Duc d'Enghien. Chateaubriand was, after his resignation, completely dependent on his literary efforts. However, and quite unexpectedly, he received a large sum of money from the Russian Tsarina Elizabeth Alexeyevna. She had seen him as a defender of Christianity and thus worthy of her royal support. Chateaubriand used his newfound wealth in 1806 to visit Greece, Asia Minor, Palestine, Egypt and Spain. The notes he made on his travels later formed part of a prose epic, Les Martyrs, set during the Roman persecution of early Christianity. His notes also furnished a running account of the trip itself, published in 1811 as the Itinéraire de Paris à Jerusalem. The Spanish stage of the journey inspired a third novella, Les Aventures du Dernier Abencerrage, which appeared in 1826. On his return to France, he published a severe criticism of Napoleon, comparing him to Nero and predicting the emergence of a new Tacitus. Napoleon famously threatened to have Chateaubriand sabred on the steps of the Tuileries Palace for it, but settled for merely banishing him from the city. Chateaubriand retired to a modest estate he called La Vallée aux Loups, in Châtenay-Malabry, 11 kilometers south of central Paris. Here he finished Les Martyrs, which appeared in 1809, and began the first drafts of his memoirs. He was elected to the Académie Française in 1811, but, given his plan to infuse his acceptance speech with criticism of the revolution, he could not occupy his seat until after the Bourbon Restoration. His literary friends during this period included Madame de Staël, Joseph Joubert and Pierre-Simon Ballanche. Under the Restoration, after the fall of the French Empire, Chateaubriand rallied to the Bourbons. On 30 March 1814, he wrote a pamphlet against Napoleon, titled De Buonaparte et des Bourbons, of which thousands of copies were published. He then followed Louis XVIII into exile to Ghent during the 100 Days, and was nominated ambassador to Sweden. After Napoleon's defeat, Chateaubriand became peer of France and state minister. In December 1815 he voted for Marshal Ney's execution. However, his criticism of King Louis XVIII, after the Chamber Introuvable was dissolved, got him disgraced. He lost his function of state minister, and joined the opposition, siding with the ultra-royalist group supporting the future Charles X, and becoming one of the main writers of its mouthpiece, Le Conservateur. Chateaubriand sided again with the court after the murder of the Duc de Berry, writing for the occasion the Memoirs sur la vie et la mort du Duc. He then served as ambassador to Prussia and the United Kingdom, and even rose to the office of Minister of Foreign Affairs, a plenipotentiary to the Congress of Verona. He decided in favor of the Quintuple Alliance's intervention in Spain during the Triennial Liberal, despite opposition from the Duke of Wellington. Although the move was considered a success, Chateaubriand was soon relieved of his office by Prime Minister Jean-Baptiste de Villars, the leader of the ultra-royalist group, on 5 June 1824. Consequently, he moved towards the liberal opposition, both as a peer and as a contributor to Journal des Débats. Opposing Villars, he became highly popular as a defender of press freedom and the cause of Greek independence. After Villars' downfall, Charles X appointed him ambassador to the Holy See in 1828, but he resigned upon the accession of the Prince de Polignac as premier. July monarchy in 1830. After the July Revolution, his refusal to swear allegiance to the new House of Orleans King Louis-Philippe put an end to his political career. He withdrew from political life to write his memoirs d'outre-tombe and his Études historiques. He also became a harsh critic of the bourgeois king and the July monarchy, and his planned volume on the arrest of the Duchess de Berry caused him to be unsuccessfully prosecuted. Chateaubriand, along with other Catholic traditionalists such as Ballantrae, on the other side of the political board, the socialist and republican Pierre Leroux, was then one of the few to attempt to conciliate the three terms of liberté, égalité and fraternité. Beyond the antagonism between liberals and socialists concerning the interpretation to give to the seemingly contradictory terms, Chateaubriand thus gave a Christian interpretation of the revolutionary motto, stating in the 1841 conclusion to his Memoirs d'outre-tombe, "Far from being at its term, the religion of the liberator is now only just entering its third phase, the political period, liberty, equality, fraternity." In his final years, he lived as a recluse in an apartment 120 Rue du Bac, Paris, only leaving his house to pay visits to Juliette Recamier in l'Abbaye aux Bois. His final work, Vie de Rancé, was written at the suggestion of his confessor and published in 1844. It is a biography of Armand Jean Le Bouthalier de Rancé, a worldly 17th-century French aristocrat who withdrew from society to become the founder of the Trappist order of monks. The parallels with Chateaubriand's own life are striking. Chateaubriand died in Paris during the Revolution of 1848 and was buried, as he had requested, on the tidal island Grand Béarcute near St. Malo, accessible only when the tide is out. House of Chateaubriand in the Vallée aux Loups. Last home of Chateaubriand, 120 Rue du Bac, Paris. Chateaubriand had an apartment on the ground floor. Chateaubriand's grave on the tidal island Grand Béarcute near St. Malo. Influence. His descriptions of nature and his analysis of emotion made him the model for a generation of Romantic writers, not only in France but also abroad. For example, Lord Byron was deeply impressed by René. The young Victor Hugo scribbled in a notebook, "To be Chateaubriand or nothing." Even his enemies found it hard to avoid his influence. Stendhal, who despised him for political reasons, made use of his psychological analyses in his own book De l'Amour. Chateaubriand was the first to define the vague des passions that later became a commonplace of Romanticism. One inhabits, with a full heart, an empty world. His political thought and action seem to offer numerous contradictions. He wanted to be the friend both of legitimist royalty and of freedom, alternately defending which of the two seemed most in danger. "I am a Bourbonist out of honor, a monarchist out of reason, and a republican out of taste and temperament." He was the first of a series of French men of letters who tried to mix political and literary careers. "We are convinced that the great writers have told their own story in their works," wrote Chateaubriand in Génie du Christianisme. "One only truly describes one's own heart by attributing it to another, and the greater part of genius is composed of memories." This is certainly true of Chateaubriand himself. All his works have strong autobiographical elements, overt or disguised. George Brandes, in 1901, compared the works of Chateaubriand to those of Rousseau and others. The year 1800 was the first to produce a book bearing the imprint of the new era, a work small in size, but great in significance and mighty in the impression it made. Itala took the French public by storm in a way which no book had done since the days of Paul and Virginia. It was a romance of the plains and mysterious forests of North America, with a strong, strange aroma of the untilled soil from which it sprang. It glowed with rich foreign coloring, and with the fiercer glow of consuming passion. Chateaubriand was a food enthusiast. Chateaubriand's steak may be named after him. Works: 1797. Essai sur les révolutions. 1801. Atala. Ou les amours de deux sauvages dans le désert. 1802. René. 1802. Génie du christianisme. 1809. Les martyrs. 1811. Itinéraire de Paris à Jerusalem. English translation by Frederick Schobel. 1814. Travels in Greece, Palestine, Egypt, and Barbary, during the years 1806 and 1807. 1814. On Buonaparte and the Bourbons, in Blum. Christopher Olaf, editor and translator. 2004. Critics of the Enlightenment. Wilmington, Delaware. ISI Books. 3-42. 1820. Memoirs sur la vie et la mort du Duc de Berry. 1826. Les Natchez. 1826. Les Aventures du dernier Abencerrage. 1827. Voyage en Amérique. 1831. Études historiques. 1833. Memoirs sur la captivité de Madame la Duchesse de Berry. 1844. La vie de Rancé. 1848-50. Memoirs d'outre-tombe. Progress in Mencha. B'Écoute-la. 1962. Catholic Political Thought. 1789-1848. University of Notre Dame Press. Honors and memberships. Elected a member of the American Antiquarian Society in 1816.